Just when we all thought Ohio State was going to take a step back after Bill O'Brien leaves for Boston College, they go out and convince Chip Kelly to take a demotion, and now I think they're even better than they were before.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That is right. You are Locked On Nittany Lions. Thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I am your host, Zach Seyko, bringing you all things Penn State Nittany Lions coverage. And today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. And if you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations and analysis around all of your favorite Penn State sports. Not just football. We talk recruiting, men's basketball, hockey, wrestling, and so much more on this show. It's all right here on Locked On and Nittany Lions. This is an all-encompassing episode as we're talking football. We're talking past Penn State football players. We're talking men's basketball and recruiting as well. All of it into one episode. And starting outside of Penn State, Bill O'Brien leaving Ohio State after what? A couple of weeks' time to take the head coaching job at Boston College. And I'll have my thoughts on what I think about that move in just a moment. But it's more about the fact that Ohio State was able to convince Chip Kelly to leave his UCLA head coaching job to take a demotion and become the offensive coordinator for the Buckeyes under Ryan Day. And it's like, wow. Because I'm sitting in my chair thinking, okay, Ohio State's got to take a step back here, right? Because how do you replace Bill O'Brien like this? He just comes in and then he leaves in a matter of weeks to take the head coaching job. And it's okay. At this point in the cycle, who else could Ohio State reasonably get that is a free agent on the market? It seems like everybody's figured out their jobs with the coaching carousel, whether that's coordinators, head coaches, NFL, college, it doesn't matter. People seem to be where they were going to be for this upcoming season. And then they get out of left field, Chip Kelly from UCLA, leaving the head coaching job to become the offensive coordinator. I thought it was fake. I didn't think it was real, but it actually is. So how does this affect Penn State? I think we should start from the point of Ohio State does not take a step back, right? Penn State's playing the Buckeyes in early November, November 2nd. Don't know the kickoff time or anything like that. And I'll tell you how it affects Penn State versus UCLA, because remember, they do play the Bruins in 2024, but for the Penn State-Ohio State game, because that is the giant. That is the behemoth that you have to beat in the Big Ten if you want a shot at winning the conference, if you want to somehow make the top four, because Penn State, even though I don't think they're going to go on as much of a tour to say that, hey, we're expecting to be in the college football playoff, where we expect to be an elite team this season like they did going into 2023, Penn State, I think, firmly believes that they are going to be a top-tier team, but they're going to have to go through Ohio State to do that. Unfortunately, that game is at home, but Ohio State went out and got all of those players from the transfer portal and ended up upgrading at offensive coordinator twice. Chip Kelly, for what it is worth, what I think of him as a person, as a program leader, is a different story. What do I think of him as an offensive guru, as someone who's going to be relegated to simply focusing on offense and calling the plays? That is not good news for Penn State. So now you get a veteran head coach similar to what Bill O'Brien was, but Bill O'Brien, okay, he was in the SEC, bounced around in the NFL and everything. So, but these minds are similar. Chip Kelly coached in the NFL. Chip Kelly's been a head coach at college. Same thing with Bill O'Brien. I would argue that Chip Kelly is slightly better as an offensive coordinator than Bill O'Brien is. And again, it's almost comparing apples to oranges at this point. Really, Ohio State couldn't have gone wrong with either, but I would argue that Kelly is a little more sound with his offensive game plan, but I would argue that Bill O'Brien is a better leader of a program, making sense taking the job at Boston College. So so Ohio State does not take a step back, and I'd argue they even took a small step forward and are going to be a little more difficult to game plan for when that one comes around for Penn State in early November, November 2nd to be specific. Now, what about that UCLA game? That was going to be one that at least with, and so many, when I did an earlier preview of the schedule, I was kind of looking through and okay, I assumed that was a Penn State victory, right? A toss up where I would lean Penn State. It's at Beaver Stadium. UCLA's traveling to the East Coast for the first time in the middle of a football season. That was going to be difficult for the Bruins to do with Chip Kelly as the head coach. And that was just a month or two ago, speculation and everything. And now that we have some clarity, this is a Penn State dominant victory because of everything that's going to happen now with the transfer portal, NIL, and what have you, because UCLA players, because Chip Kelly left as their head coach, can now freely enter the transfer portal, and UCLA cannot recruit until the transfer portal opens back up. Now, UCLA is going to go and name a new head coach, and then those players will follow in. But this is so late in the cycle. Chip Kelly, which is why I'm not going to share too many comments on what I think of him as a person in this decision. Do I agree with this decision? Well, I'm not in his shoes. I don't know, but this is an awfully scummy thing to do, to just kind of leave your players high and dry. If he felt like he didn't have job security or anything, I know there were rumors, speculation that he was going to be fired, but wow, to leave your team in the beginning of February when you're already into 4 weeks of classes and everything, UCLA is really not in a good position right now. So you can still remake your team in the transfer portal, but all of the really good head coaching candidates are off the board. They've either accepted a job elsewhere. Now that didn't stop Bill O'Brien, and that didn't stop Chip Kelly. So somebody who accepted a job, or somebody who was starting out with another program, could come in and take the UCLA job, somebody that we're probably not expecting. But UCLA it's going to take time for them to build back up. So a game that I was already favoring Penn State to win, who knows, by a touchdown or two, I imagine that they're going to win by 3 or 4 scores. So that's what that does to that game, is that turns a game where I leaned Penn State to now that's a dominant win for the Nittany Lions with everything that they have returning, and you have no idea what UCLA is going to look like by that point in time on October 5th. And here's the other factor to it. I thought that one was going to be the whiteout game. I thought Penn State versus UCLA, James Franklin versus Chip Kelly leading the Bruins, would have been the perfect game based on the schedule. Based on the schedule, would have been the ideal matchup for that to be the whiteout. And on this show, we predicted the last 2 whiteouts. We called Minnesota in 2022. We called Iowa in 2023. Penn State making UCLA its whiteout game for this upcoming season makes a lot of sense. UCLA leaving the Pac-12 to join the Big Ten, so this is the inaugural season of the expanded Big Ten. UCLA hasn't been to State College, hasn't played in Beaver Stadium since the 60s, so there is this newness. It's a high-profile matchup from that sort of sense, right? And then the California team coming cross-country to play in Pennsylvania, although it won't be as cold and frigid, but that would have, and then of course the whiteout atmosphere, the crowd, 107,000 plus, that would have been a good game for Penn State to select. But now that changes everything. Now they could still go with it. They could still go with that one, but I don't know that they will. I think Penn State might take the chance and make Ohio State now the whiteout game. There is also Washington, but I feel like that's, because it's November 9th, that one might be a little too late. But that's where this move changes things. Don't forget about the TV networks. They decide kickoffs and everything. If Big Noon is going to pick up one of these games, is going to pick up Penn State versus Ohio State, then you can forget that about being the whiteout. Because Penn State has said that they want the whiteout to be at night. It also matters what the weather is like, the temperatures. So that's why UCLA in October makes sense, but it definitely throws a wrench into things if the Bruins aren't going to be as competitive, because they could, for example, they could do Illinois. They could make Illinois the whiteout game, but they're not going to because there isn't that kind of profile that UCLA has. Brett Bielema and the Fighting Illini don't have that. But UCLA and Chip Kelly formerly did. Now we'll see what the Bruins decide to do. So, in short, that is simply how this move affects things. Ohio State becomes slightly better. Whiteout could be different, and UCLA goes from being an easy win to a much easier win. As for Bill O'Brien leaving to go to Boston College, I know that he wants to be a head coach. All these coaches do, all these coordinators. Most of them want to. 99% of them want to be head coaches at college or in the NFL. What is surprising to me is Bill O'Brien returning to college, but he's from Boston. He knows the area very well. I mean, he's coached around New England for a long time. I know that family played a lot into this decision, and just timing's everything. Who would have thought that Boston College's former head coach would have taken the defensive coordinator spot at Green Bay? So that's how all of this transpired, is the fact that the Eagles had an opening at their head coaching spot. And Bill O'Brien, I think going into the ACC, there's going to be limited expectations. Boston College isn't going to demand 11-1, 12-0 college football playoffs type of seasons. If they can be 7-5, maybe 8-4, recruiting is what it is. You can just bring in the 3 stars. Maybe you get a 4-star here and there, like a Matt Ryan, right? The once in the decade star player for them. If Bill O'Brien can do that, then this makes complete and perfect sense for him. And I think he will. I think he will be able to do that. So everything, what's going on at Ohio State is a completely different thing. And it just made more sense. Family had a lot to do with it. Forget logistics, forget coach and career, anything like that. Family, familiarity with the area. That is why Bill O'Brien, if it was that, say Florida opened up, Bill O'Brien's not and if Florida calls and says, hey, would you like to take the job? He's probably not accepting that one. I think this was kind of a perfect timing opportunity for O'Brien to, and it, yes, going in and, walking into the facility and leaving as quickly as you got there, it is kind of weird, right? You don't spend that much time there, but I think this was the case. And Ohio State has to release him from his contract as well. So they were obviously okay with agreeing to that. And how about Ji'Ayir Brown, former Penn State safety, now with the San Francisco 49ers, played in Super Bowl 58. 49ers came up short against the Chiefs, but Ji'Ayir Brown did not. Had one heck of a performance. We're going to discuss that on the other side of this break. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all of that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And the Locked On Podcast Network is making history. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and it can now be found on Amazon Fire TV. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering each and every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and on Amazon Fire TV. Ji'Ayir Brown. What a performance. Rookie safety being drafted by the 49ers in the 3rd round of this past draft, and had one epic performance that wasn't enough for the 49ers to come out on top against the Kansas City Chiefs. For Ji'Ayir Brown, 11 total tackles, the lone interception and intercepting Patrick Mahomes, was able to track down and follow the quarterback and able to track down the pass and intercept it, and was setting up the 49ers nicely. And then it still wasn't enough as they, lost the game in overtime, 25-22. I enjoyed the Super Bowl. I really did. But that performance by Ji'Ayir Brown, and that right there, if you're watching the show, I got his signature on the helmet right there. That is his signature, in fact. But Ji'Ayir Brown, had to see him emerge as this playmaker for the 49ers down the stretch, and young players, as they go through the seasons, as they go through the motions, they get better as the season progresses. So this was a really good time for Ji'Ayir Brown to continue to show that he was probably the biggest steal, one of the best defensive player, the biggest steal from a defensive player in the entire draft. And the 49ers, with all of the changes they're going to have in the offseason, they're losing players like Gibson, for example, is a fellow starting safety for the 49ers. And then Chase Young becomes a free agent, and they have a bunch of other players that they got to find a way to re-sign. But Ji'Ayir Brown is going to emerge into one of the better safeties in the NFL, and how quickly he is going to do it. NFL scouts, I have no idea how Ji'Ayir Brown fell to the third round. I really don't. Because coaches were saying it, some scouts were saying it, I was saying it on the show. We talked to Josh Taylor, who follows the NFL very closely, does a Commanders show. Some of the everydayers might remember him as a guest when we previewed the draft. And he said, he agreed with me. Yeah, Ji'Ayir Brown is one of the biggest steals overall in the NFL draft, definitely for defensive players. And look what he was able to do in the Super Bowl, picking off Patrick Mahomes, who's probably going to go down as has the trajectory to be the best quarterback in NFL history, picked him off and almost had a game-changing play. I would argue that if the 49ers would have won that game, regardless overtime, regulation, probably more so in regulation, because it seemed like Christian McCaffrey was well on his way to winning it. But Ji'Ayir Brown should have been, in my mind, MVP of Super Bowl 58. He had, again, almost a dozen tackles, had 11 total tackles, and the lone interception that Patrick Mahomes would have thrown. So the only turnover that Patrick Mahomes had committed in that game, and that would have been a game-defining moment had the 49ers won. But they didn't. Kudos to the Chiefs. Good for Kansas City. I had no time. I am reluctantly now, because they're not as good, a Steelers fan. So this one, I had no rooting stake in it, but it was a much better game, at least, I guess, over the past 5 years or so. I think this was one of the better Super Bowls that was played, and I enjoy more of a defensive caliber game. Offense is always fun. It's exciting, but I like more of the back and forth, because when any team strikes, rather than as team always scoring and scoring and scoring, it gets repetitive, it gets redundant. But then when you're not expecting it and somebody does, I like more of a defensive type of game. I do want to throw in some recruiting on this episode as well. So the past of Penn State football doing very well. The future of Penn State football is also doing very well. Penn State lands another commitment, its 11th prospect in the class of 2025, and Michael Troutman, three-star offensive lineman, commits to the Nittany Lions. It is the third offensive lineman and the third prospect to commit to Penn State in a matter of 7 days, in 1 week. So Troutman is, again, I feel like this conversation is getting redundant in its own right, that Penn State has to find these diamonds in the rough. But if other programs are just going to ignore these prospects or not show them the same type of attention that Penn State is, then the Nittany Lions are going to welcome them with open arms. So Troutwine is able to land a commitment from Troutman. Three-star interior offensive lineman, is playing center. He attends school in the state of New Jersey. So that's good to see with Fran Brown up at Syracuse that Penn State is still able to have a good hold on the state of New Jersey when it comes to recruiting. But he joins Owen Alasini, Brady O'Hara as the other offensive line commits in this class. And Penn State offered him a while back. So this was somebody that they believed in, that they saw the potential in early on. Their offer came all the way back in May 2023. And now we're seeing Troutman commit in February of 2024. He visited on Junior Day on February 3rd, and then it seemed like the decision was easier from there. If you see what he said in interviews, he talked a lot about how Penn State is setting him up for more than just 4 years of college and for football. He said they're setting him up for 40 years of life. So he believes that Penn State is putting an emphasis on just more than football and then life after football, and that was really resounding to him. He's currently listed at 6'2", 6'3", 270 pounds. Very good athlete, but this is a prospect that hasn't had that typical frame. For that was the first thing that kind of stood out to everybody when talking recruiting here, is that Troutman doesn't have the same size as any of these guys. When you think of a Garrett Sexton in the class of 2024, someone 6'5", 6'6", 6'7". So he's a little shorter, but I don't know that should be a knock against him as a football player. If a guard or a center, which is where he projects in the interior of the offensive line, is 6'3" as opposed to 6'5", I don't know what exactly that does. I mean, yes, the size always helps here, but if he's still able to have the motor, the high IQ, which is all the important traits that Penn State is really looking for here, speed, athleticism, to be the first one off the point of the attack to beat the defensive tackle on the interior, then yes, this one makes a lot of sense. But bigger picture, Troutman, again, that third offensive lineman, Penn State continues to stack offensive linemen in these classes, going all the way back to 2022, then 23, 24, and now you already have 3 prospects for 2025. Penn State could add ideally 2 or 3 more in this case. And right now, as I mentioned earlier, they have 11 commitments in the class of 2025. And according to Rivals, they are currently 6th in the team rankings. They have 4 4-stars, 6 3-stars, and 1 unranked player. But I'm sure that will change very soon enough once all of them. Again, this is an ongoing thing. You got to go to the camps. You got to go to the evaluations to get evaluated and be up on the website to have the rankings. But most importantly, if Penn State is accepting commitments from a player, don't think it's just one way or the other. It's a two-way street. It's a two-way avenue here. Penn State has to accept the commitment from a player in order for it to happen. So if Penn State's going to take a verbal commitment from someone like Michael Troutman, they value him extensively no matter what the rankings say on any of the sites, Rivals, 24/7, On3, you name it, ESPN. If their ranking is a little different, you should put more value, more stake into what Penn State says about a prospect than any of the recruiting sites. That's just the fact of the matter. And like I said, I promised that this episode would be devoted to a bunch of different things: football, recruiting, men's basketball snaps a 3-game winning streak in a game where I felt like they could have won that one against Northwestern, but some things to take away. They're very close. I'm going to break it down more on the other side of this break. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Get your buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers will get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Bet on all of your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and so much more. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Remember, if you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast for the latest conversations and analysis around your favorite Penn State sports. And in this final segment, we're talking about a different one, as we devoted the first half of the show, more than first half, to football. How about some men's basketball? As the Nittany Lions went out to Evanston, lost to Northwestern for the second time this season. First time was in the Bryce Jordan Center, and now out at Northwestern, 68-63 the final score. Penn State is so close. I really feel like they are at a breakthrough point where they have more of an identity. You're kind of returning to what Mike Rhodes likes to do with his system. You also have the complementary players in Ace Baldwin Jr., in Nick Kern, that from the VCU system came with him to Happy Valley, and now it's starting to take shape. But these ones sting. Home or road, the ones where you were not necessarily in the driver's seat, but Penn State was so close, so close, so close. And the ones that this is one they should have won. I look at Penn State, and they are not a 12-12 team. They are not a team that sits at 6-7 in conference. They are better than that. It's just a matter of chemistry and being able to gel, but they are ever so close. What impressed me about this game was the fact that Penn State all season, up until probably the last few games, they give up the easy baskets. Iowa got theirs, same thing, even though all of these were wins, Rutgers, Indiana, and Iowa, outside of Rutgers really, but the previous two games had too many easy baskets, and it felt like the Nittany Lions have been slowly chipping away at that. It's okay, fewer easy baskets here, fewer easy baskets there. And against Northwestern, a team that averages over 75 points per game, is the third best Big Ten scoring offense. Boo Buie, who is the leader of this team, it took him a while to get going. He was held scoreless for a good portion of the game and then turned it on for 15 points at the end of the game. But the fact that you were able to go on the road and keep Northwestern under 70 points. Now, Penn State's offense trailed a little bit behind. Northwestern is more of a defensive team, but has shown some offensive prowess in this case. And I just feel like, okay, Penn State is finally turning the corner when it comes to playing complete basketball. And what is the biggest change? This was something that I drew criticism for pointing out. But Kanye Clary was, in fact, holding this team back. Even though it didn't translate into a fourth win in a row, I don't know that if Kanye Clary's playing a full game here, that Penn State is within a 1 or 2 score game against Northwestern. I think that they win by double digits. Kanye Clary is not a bad basketball player. Let me put that out there. Put that forward. He can score at will. He's a good basketball player. But when he is on the floor, he's a defensive liability. He is a mismatch for opposing offenses that they can exploit because he's a smaller guard. You put another, and then he's usually guarding the shooting guard, who is going to be 6'4", 6'5", because Ace Baldwin is guarding the point guard, is guarding the guy who's running the offense there. So you could switch them, and then Kanye Clary's on the first playmaker, the ball handler for whoever your opponent is. And then so it's kind of a pick your poison. Do you want to take away the first option with Ace Baldwin Jr., who has shown that he should be in line to at least be in the conversation for Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year? I know that's a stretch, but he has been so good playing just complete basketball, but specifically anything. He's been the glue that's held Penn State's defense together and has now taken them to a newer height. But in this case, Kanye Clary, I mean, watching this game, I don't know if there's a lingering injury. I can't assume. I just saw the injury report was face. It wasn't concussion or anything else like that. Maybe he did. So this is probably something where Penn State has to work him back into the rotation. Or Penn State did, in fact, bench him. Penn State did, in fact, cut his minutes. Mike Rhodes said that we are better suited as a team because nobody was expecting Penn State to win and be competitive in any of these games. Maybe Iowa, because especially after the fact that they had beaten Indiana and Rutgers on the road back-to-back. Penn State was a 7-point underdog in all 3 of those games on the road. Rutgers, Indiana, and Northwestern covered all 3 of them. They won 2 of them outright. But that's pretty telling when this was a team that, okay, is suspect, maybe doesn't have it this year, and then all of a sudden is Kanye Clary is not in the lineup and Penn State is playing better. Penn State's playing more efficient basketball. Penn State's playing better team basketball. Penn State's also playing better defense. And Kanye Clary was out of those 2 games and minutes were cut. And then he came off of the bench against Northwestern. So I can't speculate. Maybe it is still the injuries lingering and Penn State needs him to recover to come back. But I do find it interesting that it's just he has been right now at least phased out of the lineup temporarily. Maybe who knows how long this will continue, but 14 minutes against Northwestern is very surprising. And Penn State, I think, went with what was the winning lineup, even though they didn't win, but the lineup that could best get them to a victory, even though it didn't, was Zach Hicks, Qudus Wahab, Nick Kern, DeMarco Dunn, and Ace Baldwin Jr., and that is a better defensive lineup. And how about Nick Kern? I've been saying that he was going to be that third player to emerge because it was obvious. He's already a defensively sound player, so you can't keep him off the floor. I know he's fouled out from time to time, and this was another game where he did, but it's because he is so good defensively. The only thing he was missing was a better offensive game. Leading scorer in this one against Northwestern, 18 points. Nick Kern truly is the player that can put Penn State into a dark horse in the Big Ten tournament. And I know everyone's still going to continue to write them off for the NCAA tournament, but the season is not over. The fact that they were able to win 3 out of the last 4 of a tough stretch of games and won them convincingly, double digits against Rutgers, double digits against Indiana, double digits against Iowa. Those are all good Big Ten teams. And Penn State fell just short against Northwestern. They were in that game all the way through. Maybe the basketball bounces a different way a couple of times, and Penn State wins that games. But woulda, coulda, shoulda. That only counts in horseshoes here. Penn State does get the loss. 12-12 overall, 6-7 in conference. And the committee is going to continue to evaluate that overall schedule. But Penn State, as we talked about on the show, was always going to be a second half team because they have the talent to be competitive, but it was a matter of having the chemistry. And these guys have continued to buy into what Mike Rhodes is selling in the short term here. They got Michigan State, they're at Nebraska, and Illinois is upcoming as well. Those 3 games are extremely tough, but Michigan State is at home. Wednesday, middle of the week, Valentine's Day game. Penn State, I know they got embarrassed against Michigan State, but this is a different team. I'm not going to count out Penn State and have a little more analysis leading up to the game, but because of what they're able to do defensively now and the way that they've changed, Michigan State isn't going to be able to just out-athlete them again. They're playing smarter basketball. They're playing more efficient basketball. And this one's at home. And it's also a revenge opportunity. The Spartans and Tom Izzo embarrassed them the last time. I think they want a second chance at Michigan State. We'll see how that one all unfolds. And that is on Wednesday, February 14th. That'll do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. I appreciate everyone checking out this episode. Leave a like, leave a comment, share it with friends and family. Help this show get to more Penn State fans. And remember, for more conversations around your favorite Penn State sports, whether it's football, men's basketball, men's hockey, wrestling, recruiting, we're talking it all here on Locked On Nittany Lions.